In this exercise, I'm going to create a simple Windows Forms application that will display a few sample reports from the report server. Like the example that I created for the web version of the report viewer control, I'm going to provide a drop-down list from which the user can select a report to view. All right, so here I am in Visual Studio. Once again, I haven't created a project yet. So I'll come in here, do File, New Project. And in this case, I want to select Windows Desktop and a Windows Forms application. I'll name this Win Forms Viewer and put it in a convenient location and click on OK. And there I have my initial form. So the first thing I want to do is change the properties of this. I want to change the ID do it alphabetically here. Actually, the name to WinServer Viewer. Actually, I want to change the name of the file. Sorry. From Form1 to WinServer Viewer. All right, and it asks me if I want to, since I'm renaming a file, do I want to perform a rename in the project for all the references? Form1? Yes, please do that. Okay. Next thing I'm going to do is expand the size of the form, something about twice as big as its original size. Give it a little bit more room to display the report. And then I'll change the text property here so it doesn't display just Form 1. I'm going to say View Reports. Now in this project, I'm going to store the report settings in Application Settings. So I'll come over here to Solution Explorer and open up this app.config file. And by the way, if the project doesn't have an app.config, you can add that as a new item using the usual techniques from Solution Explorer. All right, now I need to add this within the configuration tag. I am going to do a Control-KD, just kind of make that a little bit prettier there. And so I'm going to add an App Settings section, and I'm going to add a couple of keys. So the first one is for the report server, and I'll set a value of HTTP, the usual local host report server. And then I'll add a second one for the report folder. And set the value to sample reports. And I'll save that. Okay, so now those values are available for use within my application. All right, now I can continue on with my design. So I'm going to add a label and combo box. Oops, toolbox. These are regular Windows Forms controls. So I'll add a label and a combo box. Arrange them like this. There we go. And I'll change the text of the label to say Select Report. And then I'll select the drop-down, or the combo box actually, in Windows Forms parlance. Make it a little bit bigger here. And I'm going to give that a name because I'm going to access that in code. And I'll call it Report List. I also need to change its drop-down style because I don't want users to be able to enter new values. That doesn't make any sense. I'm going to control which reports they can view through this application. So I want to change this to drop-down list. Okay. And now you can see it takes on a grayish hue. You can change that, but that indicates that the user can't type anything in there. All right, and the next thing I want to add is a button. Double-click to add it, and I'll move that over to the right side of the form. I'll put it in line with the other controls here. If I can move it up a little bit. There we go. And I'll widen this so that it takes up the room between those two controls. Okay, that looks more or less even. Not perfect, but just about there. Okay, and configure the button. So I'm going to change the text of the button to say Show Report. And I'll name it Show Report Button. So a little bit easier to make a Windows form look good, more or less. Mostly because you're generally, if you stick with the defaults, you're going to have a fairly standard kind of an interface. Now, I am going to add a little bit of UI refinement that keeps the controls in place when the user changes the size of a form. I found this to be really useful because oftentimes a user will resize a Windows form according to the size of the report that is displayed within it. So if we maximize it, we want to take up the most amount of room in the form so that they have the full benefit of the screen real estate to view complex reports. Okay, so the first thing I'll do is I have the button selected. I'm going to change the anchor property from top left to top right. So now, as the form resizes, the button will stay in the same place relative to the top and relative to the right side of the form. Then I'll change the combo box. Once again, it's anchor property, and change that to top left and right. And so now the combo box will stretch as the form gets larger and shrink as it gets smaller and stay in the same relative position to the left side of the form and the top of the form. Okay, so that's just a nice bit of UI refinement. At this point, I need to add the report viewer. So I'll come down here into reporting, double click on report viewer, and there's the control. So I'm going to go ahead and position that to pretty much take up the rest of the form surface. And of course, you can manipulate it programmatically at runtime as well. I'll move it down just a little bit there. It's snapping into place. That's okay. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on making a perfect UI. All right, then I'll go back into the report viewer tasks, and because I'm going to select a server report, I'm going to need to select that option right there. I don't need to change anything else because, strictly speaking, I'm going to set these properties in code, so I don't need to set them at design time. I do need a default value here, and that's as good a starting value as any. All right, now I'm going to change the name of the report viewer, and I'll call it View Report. And I'll change the anchor property to top, bottom, left, and right. All right, so this is going to be anchored now. As the form expands, the area of the report viewer is going to continue to fill the rest of the entire section of the form. All right, so that's all my user interface work. So now it's time to do some code. So I'm going to double click outside of any of the controls, and that creates the load event procedure for the form. Now I'm going to create a couple of global variables, at least global within this class. And these are going to hold the name of the report server, and the report folder. This way, I can load the values for those variables in the load event, and then I can use them anywhere else within the code. Now, as I mentioned, the application is going to read application settings, so I need to add a reference to system.configuration, that namespace. So I go over here to Solution Explorer, right-click on References, Add References. I need to add a reference to an assembly, and I'll scroll down to system.configuration. And click on OK, and now we can use that namespace within the application. To make my code a little bit cleaner, I'll add a using statement for that namespace. Alright, now we're ready to use it. Now, by the way, in a Windows Forms application, you can add this using configuration statement to the form without adding the reference to the project. But your code isn't going to work. You'll have some access to some of the functionality because it's implemented within the system namespace, but you won't get the features that we need for this particular application. Okay, so now we need to write the code for this load event. It needs to do three things. It needs to, first of all, refresh the report viewer. That's a big difference between the Windows and web versions of the control. The Windows version, you have to explicitly tell the report viewer to refresh itself and display a report. So that's going to be the first thing that the load event does. It's not going to have a report selected, so it's going to be an empty control. But it'll then be primed for displaying the report. Second thing I need to do is read the application settings. So I'm going to set that report server variable to the report server application setting. So to do that, I'm going to use the configuration manager. Okay, that's part of that system.configuration namespace. Use the app settings item, and then refer to report server. Hopefully that red squiggly will go away. Good. Okay. And then I need to grab the report folder as well. Okay, so now we have access to those values. And then the last thing I need to do in this load event procedure is add a few reports to the drop-down list. And again, here is where in a real application I might dynamically create this, go out to the report server, look in a particular folder or folders, and read a list of reports. To keep things simple, I'm just going to add some directly to that combo box. So it's called report list, items, add. First one I'll add is customer map. Second one will be data alignment. Next one, employee list globals. And the last one, nested groups. Okay, save my work. And there's everything we need to do in the load event procedure. Now, once again, go back over to the form and double-click on the button. Whoops, the button right there. And that creates the click event procedure for the button. All I need to do in this event method is configure the report viewer and then refresh the report. So what I need to do is access that view report control, which is the report viewer. I'm going to use the server report set of properties and set the report server URL and set that equal to the report server, because that has that value that I included in the app.config file. Oops. Except what I need to do is create a URI. So I need to new up a URI object, pass in that value, and now that should work. Okay, good. And then I just need to set the report path. Same technique. That's just a string, so I can just set it equal to the report folder. All right, that's done, and I just need to refresh the report. So view report and refresh the report. All right, that's all I need to do. I'll go ahead and run the application. Hopefully I typed everything correctly and it compiles. Good sign. And then I need to select a report, click on Show It, and I did something wrong. Path of the item, sample reports, must be less than 260 characters. It is. Other restrictions, path must start with a slash. That looks right. And actually, I think what the problem is that I shouldn't have this trailing slash. Let me try that. Interesting. Operation I'm attempting. Well, let me look at the code. I'm actually, yeah, I definitely don't need the trailing slash there. Localhost report server, sample reports, that's correct. Come back over here. I didn't quite put in enough here. I can't just specify the report folder, I have to specify which report I want as well. Okay. I'm sentenced to a month on the help desk. All right, so I need to concatenate on the report list in order to include the item that the user selected. Okay, looks much better. Save my work, run it again, select a report, show it. Okay, and there's the report. I can move my mouse over the right side, expand it, and everything expands with it. I can maximize it. Maximizes, everything maximizes together. Looks pretty good, actually.